Right. Hello, everybody. I am Elle Cole from the blog cleverlychanging.com. I am a mom of twins and I homeschooled my children for 7 years. For us, it was more than just the academics. It was really teaching our children about life and taking them through a lifestyle of homeschooling. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Reimagining education within the home. So, homeschooling, I mentioned that is a lifestyle. It's where you go beyond just book learning and you begin to integrate life in those academic lessons. So, when you're teaching your children and you're homeschooling, the very first thing you need to know is that you are capable. Why are you capable? When you give birth to these children, you teach them how to walk. All of their first milestones are done within your present. So you are their first teachers. So to take it a step further and provide books and academic education is just to keep going and to continue what you've been doing this entire time. So, one thing that really stood out about reimagining homeschooling is to parallel that experience with teaching life skills. So, what do we mean? So, we have main subjects like social studies. So, when you're out with your friends and different types of people, you're teaching children about life, about social skills, about histories, because hopefully you have friends who are all different types of people. And when you invite them over for dinner and you spend time and you interact with them, your children are learning. They're learning about what life is. And so for me and my family, some of the life lessons that really stood out were just giving our kids an opportunity to learn home economics. I wasn't a kid that long ago, but when I was a kid, they had started to phase out home economics. And so by the time I went to college, I had some friends in school, roommates, who did not know how to wash clothes, who did not know how to cook food. They didn't know how to do a lot of things for themselves. And so one of the things that homeschooling allows you to do is to parallel the academic lessons and chores with home economics. And so that could be adding in sewing, adding in mechanical skills, adding in anything that we would typically do around the house that are considered like different domestic jobs, but teaching them because you actually have to learn how to clean to do it properly. It's not something that just comes innately to everybody. And so homeschooling, it gives you an opportunity to really build and develop a well-rounded person. So that's what we love about teaching life skills. The next thing is personal finance. Now, all of us have bills. We may not all have a lot of bills, but all of us have bills. And homeschooling gives you an opportunity to allow those lessons about paying bills, about getting invoices, and if you're an entrepreneur as well, sending invoices. It really helps when you show your kids how those different things are taken care of. It gives your kids an opportunity to see real life personal finance in action, especially if you are a family that has a family budget, because a lot of homeschoolers often live on one income. And so the family has to learn how to budget properly so that all of the needs get met. So, what are some personal finance lessons that have stood out in my house? So, one of those lessons is budgeting. So, we had a food budget, and so it was our job for our children to sit together and come up with the weekly food menu. So, you can call it meal planning, you can just call it making your grocery list and finding out what you all are going to eat. But incorporating the children in that process, it helps to make sure that they get the types of food that they want and also learn nutrition. So when you're doing different lessons like feeding and meal planning, that you can incorporate health and also meal planning. With meal planning, you can also incorporate nutrition. And so those are lessons that will stay with your children for a lifetime, because the way that we are raised often is how we grow up, and it kind of sets the foundation for what our children's children will learn. And so we want to make sure that they have a good, solid foundation so that they know what well-rounded meals are, what a complete meal is, what a balanced meal is. And so it gives you an opportunity to kind of set that foundation in motion. Another thing that our children really had an opportunity to learn when it comes to personal finance is paying off your bills. For us, I think of our cars. My husband and I, we didn't want a car note, so we ended up saving our money and paying for our cars outright. And so that taught our kids that, hey, you don't have to pay month to month to kind of, have this car. You can buy it outright. And so it really taught our kids about saving, about just having that discipline, because a lot of learning and a lot of different lessons are all related to discipline. And so that's one of the personal finance lessons that we taught them. During the pandemic, my husband began to teach them different lessons about the stock market and how to grow your money and how to invest. And so we don't only want our kids to know how to pay their debts, we also want them to learn how to expand their money. So I think about the parable of the talents. And, I remember in the Bible, it talks about don't bury your talents. And so when we teach our kids about investing, that's teaching them how to develop a skill and have a talent so that they can grow. And when our children started to put money into the stock market with my husband's direction, they were able to pick stocks. They looked at what was going on in the world and what was going on. Which stocks should you contribute to, because they are not affected by a global pandemic? And so it caused them to have opportunities to learn critical thinking and problem solving and to look at the world as a whole. And that's where you start to put application with academics. And those lessons, because you're using different parts of your brain to reinforce the lessons, they tend to stay with the children. And so teaching life skills through personal finance is something that homeschool really helps children learn. I don't know about you, but when I was young, I did not have personal finance classes with my family. I grew up in a single family home, and my mother often lived from paycheck to paycheck. So we didn't usually have a surplus each month. And so when I saw her habits and, all the things that we had to buy, and often we didn't have enough at the end of the month, I began to realize that when I became a mom or when I grew older, those aren't lessons that I wanted to keep myself. And so whether you're really good with personal finance or you're struggling along the way, your children will learn. And so in my case, I was able to learn, not necessarily in the best way, but I did take those lessons in seeing what not to do in a way that I was able to do better when I became a mom. And so one of the things that, you can do within homeschooling, and really you can do it even if you're not homeschooling, and that's give your kids an opportunity to grow the money that you give them with a bank account. You can make this an integral part of their lessons and of their academic experience in teaching. So you don't just have to talk about, paying your bills on time or balancing a checkbook. You can actually, in a homeschool setting, take your kids down to the bank, open up an account and have them put real money into the account, watch it grow, and develop practical methods of learning and application that will stay with them into the future. The next lesson that I've noticed that we've really been able to teach our children is the lessons about negotiation. So my husband and I, we own a couple properties, and one of the things that we've been able to learn is when you have contractors come in to do work, you can negotiate with them. So that is something that our children have been able to learn firsthand. And what a wonderful skill to have, negotiation skills. And I gotta be honest with you, when my husband and I first bought our home, I was 24, he was 25. We were very young and we did not have those negotiation skills. They have had to develop over time. And as we learned, our children learned right alongside of us. And so we've had to bring in different contractors to fix different things. And so our kids were able to learn different questions to ask to really validate and make sure that that person, was insured, that they had a good understanding of what the scope of the work is and how to complete it, and that the deadlines were real and they were understood beforehand. And the amounts that needed to be paid were understood prior to the job being done. And these are critical lessons that can be shared with your child in a homeschool setting that really makes the learning practical, and it's teaching life skills. That's what we want our children to have. The next thing about reimagining homeschool is that you can instill your personal values into your kids as you're teaching them. So when we think about homeschooling, we think about parents being right there alongside of their children every step of the way. But that's really not how it is for everyone. Homeschooling can look many different ways. There is no one way to homeschool. But regardless of whatever method that you choose, because there are different methods, some that come to mind are the classical method. Charlotte Mason comes to mind, Waldorf, and there are definitely others. I've considered myself an eclectic homeschooler because I like to take different lessons from different places and put them into our daily lesson to teach my children. So I consider myself an eclectic homeschooler. So in giving my kids those values, some of my values have been to make sure that I'm teaching my children to be kind to other people, to be compassionate. A lot of the work that I do as an entrepreneur involves advocating for others and advocacy. And it's something that I'm truly passionate about. So naturally, I share my passions with my children. And so in homeschooling, you are in the way that you interact with other people. That's one way to show your children your values. You can definitely talk to them about your values. And often we think about homeschooling. You may or may not be a Christian person, but sometimes there are homeschool curriculums that do have Christian concepts and books and things like that. And you can easily integrate those lessons in your homeschool. You can have your children learn verses and find different verses that may coincide and teach lessons outside of just those main memory verses. You can really go beyond just the memorization of it all and really make it more practical by providing ways that it comes up in daily life. So that's just one way to share your values. And another way is through faith. So some homeschoolers really believe in music and music education. So if you are a person who goes to church, you may have your children attend a church choir, participate in the choir and sing, and that may be one way that you allow your children to learn more about your faith by going to church. It could be through books. The beauty of homeschool, that really it's one of my favorite things about homeschooling, and that's the ability to be able to read what you want. I think reading is really just a skill that everybody should have. And while not all of us are readers, now we have different things like audiobooks that will allow us to read even though somebody else is reading to us. And so that gives us an opportunity to expand what we want to know. So for me as a homeschooler, I'm often busy and we have housework and different things that need to be done. So as a family, we can put on an audio book, and while we are doing the different chores and doing things around the house, we can still learn at the exact same time. And so it's really a way to help teach our kids how to multitask in a way that is feasible. Because in some ways, you literally can't do a whole lot of things all at once, but there are some things that you can do. And so that's one of the ways that you can incorporate faith. Another thing is integrity. Depending on where you live, your homeschooling experience will be a little bit different. I'm in the Maryland area, and they require us to keep a portfolio. And I think keeping that portfolio is a way of challenging yourself and a way of really incorporating integrity. Why do I say that? Because in our portfolio, we have to date the material, we have to grade the material, and so our children are watching us. So, how are we being accountable to our state, accountable to ourselves, and accountable to each other? And it really, by keeping that portfolio, we're able to show that we have been true to our word and we've been able to kind of have an outline. If you are, depending whether or not you're the mother or the father doing the primary part of educating the children, you can share that portfolio with your spouse or with your loved ones. You can show other people what your children are learning, how they've grown. And so for me, keeping a portfolio has been a way of validating our experience because I'm able to look into the book and see tangible ways of how my children have matriculated. And so everybody's experience with that is going to be a little bit different. But for me, it was an experience of joy. Even though, I'm saying it was an experience of joy, but there were times when it was hard to get everything ready in time. I'm not saying that you're going to be perfect at it, but it does encourage you to plan beforehand, to have everything ready. So when it comes time to be accountable, you can be. The next thing is homeschooling allows you to teach your children about having a work ethic. Now, I'm mentioning work ethic because it's super important, especially for our youth today. Many homeschooling families often are entrepreneurs, but even when we are entrepreneurs, we're still accountable. We still have deadlines. And so often we are working around the clock. And so we have to learn how to have defined work hours, our work hours where we're also able to put our work life aside and also take care of our home life. So we're teaching children how to work and live at the same time. And for those of us who believe that self-care is important, I don't necessarily believe that we can really balance it all. So I'm not saying that within that work ethic and really trying to make money while homeschooling, trying to teach all of those different aspects, that we're able to do that and just move on without accountability, without balance. Because here's the thing, balance is kind of tricky. It's going to be different for every household. Now, for me and the way that I homeschooled in my house, we did not replicate what I was doing in public school when I was young, because that concept became entirely too overwhelming to have everything done at a certain time and to move on as if I had a full classroom of kids and follow the curriculum to the T. We had to be a little bit more flexible with that. And so by learning how my children learn best and learning what types of information excites them that they are able to do on their own, it teaches self-sufficiency. And when you can really kind of go beyond the academic lesson and teach children more about self-sufficiency, where they're able to see you learning alongside of them and also working and teaching others, that's another way where you're really instilling different lessons about work ethic in your children. And so I think that's a very important part of homeschooling and really understanding the value of homeschooling. The next thing I want to talk about is self-directed learning. Self-directed learning is something that is very important in the homeschool because for many of us, we don't just want to throw information out there at our children. We want them to receive the information that they desire to learn. So, what am I saying? I'm saying we want to know what our children's natural talents are. What are their skills? When we see that our children maybe is a great singer, we want to put them in singing lessons and help them expand that gift because they truly have gifts. Every child has a gift. And as homeschoolers, it is our job to unlock what those gifts are. And so homeschooling through self-directed learning gives your children an opportunity to do that. And you want to create personal learning goals. So teach your children how to have their own goals so that they can motivate themselves and be more self-sufficient. As your children grow, especially when they've been homeschooled for many years. As a parent, it shouldn't be getting harder. You got to teach your kids self-sufficiency. And so I think that's just one of the lessons that you want to instill. The next thing is give your children an opportunity to provide feedback about their education and receive feedback about their education. Just like for us when we were on jobs, we want to be able to extend that same line of communication to our children so they have an input in what they're learning. Because what happens is when they have a say, often they take it more seriously and they're able to appreciate the experience more. The next thing is it will allow them the opportunity to take initiative. We are homeschooling parents, but we won't always be there right with our children. This year, for the first time, I sent my children to school. And it's been a great lesson of learning all of those lessons that I've instilled in them. I've been able to see how they're able to motivate themselves, how they're able to take initiative and go beyond just what the assignment is and learn more. And so even if you are looking to put your kid into school one day, remember that all of the lessons that you have been teaching them, and if you have been reimagining their education and getting them ready to love learning, then you are setting a foundation that will stay with them for a lifetime. So that is all. Remember to stay engaged, stay aware, stay in tune, and continue to grow alongside your kids. Thank you for listening.